My name is Eugene Liscio, but my legal name is spelled E-U-G-E-N-I-O. Last name Liscio, L-I-S-C-I-O.
Okay, you may proceed. How are you this morning?
Good morning.
Where are you from?
I'm from Toronto.
Welcome to California.
Thank you.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a 3D forensic analyst, and so I have a company which does reconstructions of things like shootings, crash investigations, things like this.
What is your educational background that has you in that field?
So I originally was, I graduated from Ryerson Polytechnic University, which is one of the 3 universities in Toronto, and I studied aerospace engineering. So I graduated and I worked for Boeing. Well, it used to be McDonnell Douglas, and then it became Boeing, and then I worked for another aerospace company in Buffalo. And so along the way, I was always working with 3D technologies. So they use it in the aerospace industry to like position the aircraft and things like that, jigs, and they use it during manufacturing. Also, engineers use a lot of these computer programs to draw things or parts. They do CAD, what's called computer-aided drafting or design. And so I've always been involved with 3D and always been interested in it. And then somewhere along the way, I started looking at other areas that were using 3D technologies. And then I happened upon an article a long time ago that showed somebody was using these technologies for like collision reconstruction and for shooting scenes and things like that. And so that's when I first became interested in it. In 2005 is when I officially started my company. And I began working, doing mostly civil cases at the time. When you first start, civil cases like car crashes and things like that are very common. So it's the low-hanging fruit, I say, to get started. But then along the way, it transitioned into mostly homicide cases. So I do a lot of shooting cases right now, officer-involved shootings and things like that. Other things I can tell you about today, like for example, what kinds of things I do today is I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto. They have a forensic sciences program there, and I teach one of the courses there, which is called 3D Forensic Reconstruction and Mapping. And that course is really about bringing together all these different types of 3D technologies. So I know, I understand that you've heard about the laser scanner already, but there's other technologies. There's like hand scanners, there's like microscopic scanners, there's photogrammetry, something else I'll probably be talking to today. And so all these technologies can be used together to like reconstruct a shooting scene or to do like a bloodstain pattern analysis, to do a number of different things. And so that's really what the course is about. One of the benefits of being at the university is you have students who are eager to do work and do research. So we do a lot of research with students. So since 2010, I've been mentoring students doing different types of validation studies and research in areas such as clandestine grave documentation, anthropology. There's a lot of forensic anthropology students at the university, so I get involved with bones, a lot of bones that we do there. Bloodstain pattern analysis, ballistics, like shooting reconstructions, and a number of different things as well, like using drones for documenting crash scenes and things like that. So I have, there's several published papers that I have in scientific journals along these lines. And outside of that, I also do training. So the company that makes the laser scanner, there are 2 external trainers that I know of globally, and I'm one of the 2. So often they'll ask if I can go train a police agency. So even last week I was in Kentucky training a police agency on how to use the laser scanner for crime and crash scene investigations. And so I've trained, I'm going to just say maybe at least 20 agencies in the laser scanner or photogrammetry, agencies such as like the FBI, the United States Army Criminal Investigation Lab, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and then a whole host of different police agencies. And here in California, Sonoma, Simi Valley, and not too long ago, I think it's called, well, I went to a training in Milpitas. But yeah, so that's the bulk of what I do. that makes up the heart of my work.
Okay. You mentioned the fact that you've been involved with, aside from like civil cases, criminal cases like homicides, so that. Have you testified previously as an expert based on your work in those types of cases?
Yes, I testified in Canada and the U.S. on criminal and civil cases, both at the state level and federal level, and I've worked for both prosecution and defense, and it's split about 50-50.
Can you describe in general, in a criminal context, the processes that you will use in analyzing evidence? And this is just in a general sense.
So normally what happens is I'll be contacted, and obviously the prosecution or defense will have an idea of something that they want or something that might be possible. So I'll ask them what kind of information they have, and they might say we have usually photos, video, sometimes they have laser scanner data, sometimes they have reports, witness testimony, things like that. And so depending on what it is that I'm doing, I will ask for certain pieces of evidence. Some things are more important to me than others. So I usually go for the most important things, and I don't worry about the other stuff. And then I take that evidence, and then I'll process it myself and analyze it myself, and then come up with my own analysis, and then I usually end up writing a report.
In that process, are you always privy to, or do you want to know all of the surrounding circumstances of what you're investigating?
Sometimes people want me to know, but to be honest, I just usually focus in on what I need to do, and I try not to let the other, I'll call it the background noise, affect me too much.
Why is that?
It's not necessary for my work, and of course there's always the question of bias. Somebody's watching the news, or you hear a lot about different things that are going on, so you have to be careful about the information that you receive and how you interpret it and that sort of thing.
You mentioned certain technologies you use, specifically the laser scan. What other technologies do you use in your occupation analyzing evidence?
So the main ones are the laser scanner. There's also things called structured light scanners, so they're smaller. They're meant for smaller things. So if you were going to document like a vertebrae or a bone or a skull, you don't use the big scanner, you use a smaller one. It's intended for better accuracy, and it's some of them are handheld. You can kind of move them around a small part. There's also photogrammetry. So photogrammetry, I'll talk to, but it allows you to use your camera, your digital camera, to take photographs of something and then produce a 3D model. So there's that. There's also things like there's like microscopic scanners. So it basically looks like a microscope, but it's actually a scanner. It'll actually document a surface in 3D. So they use that, for example, in ballistics. If they want to look at a bullet or a cartridge case, and they want to look to see what kind of little scratches or little markings are on there, they'll use that at a very, very high magnification and in 3D. But I've also used things like CT, MRI, so things you find at the hospital. Sometimes that's a different type of scanner, but it does document things in 3D. And then, and other than that, I mean, those are the main ones. There's some other little ones, but for example, drones are very popular now. People are flying these little, remote helicopter drones, and so they have cameras on them. And so by taking a lot of photos from those cameras, you can reproduce a 3D model of an entire roadway or a crime scene. And so I've done work in that area as well.
All these processes, are some of them software-based?
Well, almost all of them are going to have a software component. So there's a hardware component, and then there's a software component all the time. They work hand in hand with one another.
So specifically when it comes to 3D modeling or some of the photogrammetry, is that driven by computer programs?
Yeah, absolutely.
All of the processes you just talked about, the equipment and now the computer programs, are those generally accepted in the scientific community, in the field, the forensic field that you're in, for use in evidence analysis?
Yes, absolutely. You could run through a small list, but for example, the laser scanner, it's not a new instrument. It's actually been around quite some time. So the first laser scanner came out at about 1990. There was a a company called Cyrax that came up with the first model, and somewhere around 2005 or so, police started using scanners. So like FBI, Secret Service, things like that. They were taking these things and using them to document scenes or arenas and different things like that. So it's been around for some time, and there's even organizations that have been around for more than 20 years that focus in on these 3D technologies. So there's a conference I'm going to in July that's in Germany, and that conference has been going around for I think over 20 years that uses these technologies. So it's not new. Photogrammetry, not a new technology at all. You can go back to the 1920s, and the police were using them in crash investigation way back then. It's pretty amazing. But the technology itself started off in about the 1850s. And the same thing goes with these hand scanners and other different types of scanners, CT, MRI. They're no longer new. It may be new to some people, but they've been around for some time.
You've used the term photogrammetry. Can you describe for us what that is and what it entails?
Sure. So photogrammetry is, as I was saying before, is a technology that allows you to use a digital camera to take multiple overlapping photographs of an object. And you can process those photos to create some kind of 3D model, or you can take measurements. So the term itself, so photogrammetry, is made up of 3 Greek words. So photo or photon or photos. The gramming part is gramma, which means to write or draw. And then metry is from metron. So metron means to measure. So you have photos and gramma. So you have a light drawing. A light drawing is just a picture, a photograph, right? Whether it's on a film sensor or a digital sensor. And then metron means to measure. So the fundamental word, photogrammetry, if you went to the heart of it, it means that you can take measurements from photographs. But it doesn't mean that if I took a picture of a ruler, I could just look at the ruler and I go, hey, I can just pick 2 points and I know that's a 12-inch ruler, right? That's not how it works. It means that you're using these images, multiple images, which overlap, and then you run it through an analysis, and then you can pull out some 3D or some metric, what I would say is metric or geometric information.
And how is that used in your field?
Well, it's used in a couple of ways. So one is when you have the ability to take multiple overlapping images. So when you have a drone or something flying in the air, you can take multiple images of a roadway, a mountain. People use it for surveying. On a smaller scale, you could use it to document like a clandestine grave or a homicide scene by taking multiple overlapping photographs. And you take those photographs, you put them in a software program, and it processes them through. And I can talk about the process, but it might take me a little while, but I'll probably bypass that for now. What I will say though is we have a special case here when we do work from a security camera. So photogrammetry works with multiple overlapping images, and if you take a single security camera, you have multiple images for sure, but you don't have overlapping images, or I should say images from a different perspective that are overlapping, right? So you need that movement of the camera to get some of that 3D information. But there is a way to recover some measurement information, and that is you have to help to give some of that information to the software. And if you can help it along with some information, then you can recover some of the 3D data. I have a little...
What kind of help would that be?
Well, it may help if I can explain how it works a little bit, and then I can lead into the process. If I may, would it be possible for me to sit there and show some things, or do you want me to wait?
Let me ask you a couple questions and then we'll get to that.
Sure.
So you've been asked to consult on this case and look at some evidence, is that right?
That's correct.
And what were you provided?
I was provided with the security camera footage from the home on, I believe it's Avocado Vista Lane. I was provided with photographs, and I was provided with laser scan data of the neighborhood of Avocado Vista Lane and of a 2000 Chevrolet truck. But for most of my purposes, the most important pieces that I had to use was the original security camera footage, and the laser scan data. Those two pieces are important.
And when you received those materials, what process did you undertake?
Okay. So, so just understand there were two streams here that are going to be separate, and then they're going to come back into another program later. Okay, so I had to process these independently. So let me start with the video, because I think that's the easier of the two. The video, there was daytime and nighttime footage from this particular camera. So really what I did was I took that footage and I brought it into a program called Input Ace. And Input Ace is a program that's used by forensic video analysts to interrogate video, to look at the video and try to see underlying, like, what's happening. So it treats the video in a forensically sound manner. So what I did at that point was I had to convert the video. So I converted it to an uncompressed format. So when it first writes the video to the original file, it takes these series of images and it codes them. So the manufacturer who makes this security camera system, it kind of writes it in its own language. Let's say let's say it's like an interpreter of a certain language, and when you want to view it, you need their interpreter to look at it. So what I did was I uncompressed it, or made another file that was easily viewed. You could view it on any video player on, a PC or a Mac or something like that. From there, what I did was I only needed a small piece of it. So when you see this vehicle that's passing in the video with the headlights, so I didn't need the entire video. So I made a sub-clip, a little smaller portion. And then from that sub-clip, what I did was I exported the individual frames, and it turned out to be about 106 frames, of which I used the first like 79 or 80 or so to look at. And those are those individual images that came out of there. Those had a resolution of 704 by 480 pixels, so relatively small, right? Relatively small. When you think of a digital camera, like a decent digital camera today could have something like 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. Probably on your phone, if you have a fairly recent phone, you might have like 3,000 pixels by something else. So 704 by 480, it's a very common format for security cameras, but it's by no stretch a high resolution camera for sure. So that leads me to the individual images that I used for the analysis. So that's the video. Then there, on the other side, is the laser scanner data. So I was supplied with a number of laser scan data, or raw scans, what I would call raw scan files. And so there were some of the truck, or this vehicle, and there were some of the neighborhood, like the roadway. So some were done somewhere in maybe 2015, and then some were done quite recently. So what I did was I took the data and I processed it myself. So the scanner that was used is a Faro scanner, and there were two types. So there was one that was used in 2015 and one that was used most recently. And the type doesn't matter, but the manufacturer is called Faro. They have a software package called Faro Scene. So I used Faro Scene to take all that data and then basically bring it all together. So I understand somebody has already testified on the laser scanning stuff, so I'm not going to get into it too deep.
If I may interrupt briefly, we heard previously from Mr. Russ about a process called registration of the data information. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, so registration is just a fancy term that somebody came up with instead of calling it alignment. Okay, so when you have individual scans, it's like having individual pieces of a puzzle. And then what you have to do is you have to register the data or align the data. So you take the one piece, the second piece, the third piece, and you kind of piece them all together, and so that they're all aligned in one coordinate system. And that's really what registration means, is that you're aligning them all to one coordinate system. So they all have the same units. If I measure from one scan position to some other object, I'm dealing with the same coordinate system. That's really all it means. And once I did that, once I have all the scan data together, then what I did was I exported the scan data into a format that's understood by other software programs. So now I'm at a point where on one side I have a number of individual frames from the video, and on the other side I have 3D data, which we call point cloud. So I have a point cloud of the roadway, and I have a point cloud of the truck. And so that's the starting point now for the next step of the process.
any of the processes that you just described, does it alter in any way the underlying data or images or pixels or anything like that?
So the scale, let's say for example, the scale or the colors, that's all maintained. So there's no stretching or changing of that sort of thing. So when you export it, you know what the units are, and when you import it into the other software, you have to know what the units are. And then once you do that conversion, if you take a measurement of something, you'll see that it's, if something is 20 feet, you measure it and it ends up being about 20 feet. Yeah.
So again, the process that you just described, is that generally accepted amongst your peers in the scientific community for this type of analysis?
Yes, it is.
So in preparation for your testimony today and analyzing the evidence, did you create certain constructions of that evidence to illustrate your findings?
Yes, so I have a 3D reconstruction which brings this data together, and I based my report on that reconstruction.
Your Honor, at this time, due to his cumbersome computer and being able to need to connect to the system, can I ask the witness to step down to counsel table during this part of his testimony?
Sure, as long as he uses the microphone there so we can.
We will make sure his microphone is on. If we can have lights in, please, and he's going to present opportunity two. Sure. For the record, Your Honor, the digital graphics that he is going to be projecting are being independently recorded, so we have them for the record. And I'll ask to mark them as an exhibit when
We're gonna have like a CD disc?
yes, we'll burn it to a disc and mark it as an exhibit for the record.
And so what's our next in order? So it'll be marked as 973.
973, thank you.
Okay, not sure if you can hear me very well. Let's see the images here. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. I'll try to speak into the microphone here. So I want to start and just really go through the process of what I did and start from the point where I have the images and the laser scan data and just show you what it is, and then I'll show you how it comes together. So I'll start with the individual images. So these are the single images of the video that I extracted, and I can just cycle through them left and right. And so this program is it's like a flip book. It's just going from one image to the next image like this. And so these are the images that I've used. Okay, so I'm just showing you what I have, and in my structure over here in my Windows Explorer, you can see all the different frames, and this one's 106 down here. Now I didn't have to use them all because I used like the first 79 or 80 or so. Those were the most important ones.
If I can ask, while you flip through your directories or your programs, if you can take it a little slow so we can all catch up as we watch on the monitors. I know ease of comfort allows you to thumb through them quickly.
Yeah, okay, so I can make these a little bit bigger. Maybe that's a little clearer. Okay, so that's the individual images. Let me move to the laser scan data. So what I have on my screen here is the what I would call is the point cloud, the exported point cloud, and I can move this around. So this is in a 3D environment, and I can rotate this object around. I can zoom in and out. I can move into different positions, and this is, although it may look, I can back out and make it look very small on my screen. This is all to scale, actually. So if I move in, and let's say I wanted a measurement of a driveway or something like that, just to give you an example, I could, let's say I wanted to create a line, and let me just pick any 2 points. I'm not going to be too picky about this. Oh, excuse me, I gotta turn something on. I will apologize because there's a lot of data here and I'm going to be flipping around back and forth looking for things, so excuse me if I'm doing some of that, but that's just the nature of having so much data here. So I have a point here and then I'll have a point here. Okay, so I just created a line, and if I want to know what the measurement of that line is, I just go to measure, and down here it tells me it's 188 inches, 108.6 inches. I'll leave it in inches for now, but I could change that if I want to. I can just go to feet if it makes more sense for people. Let me go to decimal feet, and now it's telling me it's 15.7 feet. Okay, so that's kind of how you could use this as a to measure from one place to the other.
If I may ask, when you do that type of measurement in the point cloud, it's based on your selection of those 2 points that it's measuring, correct?
Yes, so I'm choosing where to measure from.
And the precision of your points may be slightly off from the exact edge, in this case the concrete of the driveway, by millimeters or even an inch?
Yes, so I was just picking quickly, but I could go in really closer and try to get it as precise as you can. But of course, there's always going to be, you may be a little bit to one side or the other side of the measurement. Sure.
Okay. So if you could please continue with. I had another question about what we're seeing now. Mm-hmm. This overview of the neighborhood. There appears to be these weird circles down the middle of the street. What are those? Okay. Yeah, there's a couple of things going on here. So one is you have these big empty spots. So there were vehicles in this location, and just to keep it simpler, I just blocked them out. I just got rid of them. So you can hide them, or you can just cut them out, just so we have a flat roadway. These circles that you're seeing here, these are scan positions. So the scanner can't see underneath itself, so there's always like a little hole underneath itself, a blind spot, okay? But you can see the sun must have been low in the sky, because I can see the shadow of the scanner where it was. So by looking at these different blind spots, you can see where the scanner was located. So I can see there's a bunch down the road. I can see there's one here by the fire hydrant. Looks like there's one here on the porch. So there's a number of them that are around. A number of different scans were done here. Okay. All right. Please continue with what the process you underwent.
Okay. So the other thing that I had here was also a scan of the truck, but I'll bring that up later, because what I'd like to do now is show you what I did with the individual images and the laser scan data and how they come together, okay? So for that, I have to do a little bit of background, a little bit of explanation into photogrammetry, okay? So I'm using a photogrammetry program to bring the individual images and the laser scan data. So how does that work? You have to kind of understand a little bit about how a camera works. And if you understand that, then it might make some sense. So I'm going to try to do this as simply as possible. So I've got this old camera that I've ripped apart, and I like this camera because it's about as simple as you can get. So if you try to imagine what a camera is doing, a security camera, your phone camera, whatever, they all pretty much work in the same fundamental way. And if I'm here and I'm looking at the screen and I want to take a picture, in the room there are photons of light flying around or bouncing around, right? So there's they're moving in all kinds of directions. But the ones that enter the camera, okay, if I want to take a picture of the screen, let's say I start in the top left corner of the screen. One fundamental principle that you have to understand is that photons or light rays always travel in a straight line. Okay, always, at least for our purposes, they're always in a straight line. So if I start from that point in the corner of the screen, I project a light ray that comes out and it hits the lens. Now the lens acts as a focusing instrument. So if you had a magnifying glass and you were outside in the sun, you could sort of raise and lower the magnifying glass, and what do you see underneath, sort of on the ground? You see this point or this circle of light, and it can get very, very fine, focused to a point, right? Or if you move it away, it starts to open up a bit. And if you were really mean as a kid, you'd burn insects and things like that. Hopefully you didn't do that, but you know that you can focus the light, okay? And that's what happens in the lens here, okay? So what happens is all this light is coming in, okay? You have the lens, and the lens bends the light to a point. That point is called the focal point, okay? So the light continues to travel through that focal point, and eventually it hits the back. Now I've just put a yellow piece of tape here. This would be on your camera like a digital sensor. Okay, it would be what used to be film. This was an old 35 millimeter camera. I've had this since I was about 12. But a digital sensor, I've got some here, and you could look at these. I could pass them around. Is extremely small. Okay, it's very, very small, and it's just a little square rectangular chip. Okay, so remember, light comes in, goes through the lens, gets focused to a point inside either the lens, or it could be even just a little bit behind the lens. The light continues going through, and then it projects an image on this little sensor. So photogrammetry, you can think of as going backwards. Okay? So if I close this now, and I have the camera in the exact same spot, if I looked at the image, I should be able to see a pixel where that corner is. So if I mark that pixel on the back of the lens, or sorry, on the sensor, I can go backwards. I can project a light ray from that point of the pixel to the focal point of the lens, back out to the focal point, and then at some point it's going to go out and it's going to hit the corner of the screen. So I went backwards. So coming in goes this way, hits the sensor, but I can go backwards. So you can think of photogrammetry that way. Now, before I said that photogrammetry, the original, the way most people use it today, is that they take multiple photographs. So I take a photograph here, take a photograph here, I'll move over here, maybe kind of 4 or 5 photographs from different positions. So if in each of those camera positions, if I knew where the camera was, and I could pick the point, the corner point of the screen in each one, what would happen is those lines would all come together and they would converge and they would meet at that point. Okay? That's how I get 3D information out of using multiple images. Okay? Those rays, they intersect at a point, and I have a very unique 3D point. In our case, we don't have that possibility. Okay? We have a security camera. We only have one camera position. It didn't move and take pictures from other positions. So I don't have all these rays, right, going and intersecting. And of course, when you take a picture, all that light is in 3D. It's in the real world. So I have a corner point off the bench, and I've got the corners up there, and it's all, there's depth, there's height, there's everything else. So in the process of taking the photo, I've gone from the 3D world, I've come in and I've projected it on a flat sensor, right? It's flat. So by doing that, I lost something. Okay, and what I lost was the 3D data. I can't go backwards now and say, okay, I'm starting with just a pixel, and all of a sudden I can get 3D data. It doesn't work that way, not from a single camera image. So I have to help it, and the way I help it is through the laser scanner data. Okay, so now what I do is in the software, and I can show you, but I have the image from the video, and I have the laser scanner data. And what I do is I say, okay, I want the corner of the screen in the image. Now I'm going to go to my 3D data, and I'm going to click the same point in the 3D data. Then I'm going to say, well, I want the corner of the bench there in the picture, and I'm going to go to the 3D data, and I'm going to hit the corner in the 3D data. So every pixel is going to be assigned the 3D data in XYZ coordinate. Okay, so X and Y are sort of the horizontal coordinates, and then the Z would be the height. Okay, and so it would be assigned all these 3D positions. So now what I've done is, if you can imagine that I've marked a bunch of points, all those light rays from those points, I know where they are now, they're going to all come back this way, like that. They'll go through the lens, go through the focal point, and it's going to say the camera has to be here in order to make all of those lines meet and intersect at the proper point. Okay? So this concept of marking points and assigning 3D data to the image, the same points on the image, helps to reconstruct the camera position. So my job, when I do this, is to mark and reference points. The software calculates where the camera is located. Okay, so it tells me where the camera is. So what I want to do here, just very quickly, is show you the photogrammetry software. So this is a software program called Photomodel, and it's been around since the 90s. And what I have here right now is a daytime image from the camera. Now, if the camera doesn't move, I can use any image. right? I can use a nighttime image, I can use a daytime image. If a daytime image helps me to see more, I'll use that, right? I'll show you something in a little bit where I made a nighttime image, but it's a composite image, and I'll explain why I use that one too. But this image here, you can see that I have some points. So like, I've got a control point here, so that's from the 3D data, from the laser scan data, one here. So I assigned it all these coordinates here. And when I do that, and I solve for the camera, this is the 3D view. You see, let me zoom in here. I've got a camera here. See that there? So I've got this camera that it calculated. So this camera is up in the porch area. And these are all the points that some points that I've used to like put it all together. Let's look at this a different way. So now this is like the focal point of the camera. This is how the image aligns to that focal point. And let me do one more thing, because I think it'll express here. So see all these lines that are now projected to the points? This is what I was talking about, which is if you go to all the points and you send a line, a ray of light that goes back to the camera, they intersect the image, right? They intersect the image at the proper place where I've located the point, and they all lead back to a focal point where the camera would be located. Okay?
Was there a way to zoom in on where the lines cross through the image to see what you're referring to?
Sure. Let me go back here. Okay, you'll see that they all come back here from the image. Now, from this point here, what I did was, I want you to notice something on this side here. You see how there's this black edge around this image? Well, every camera has certain characteristics, okay, or certain distortions. Have you ever seen like maybe some of you are familiar with a GoPro camera, or you've seen a video where, GoPro, sorry. Where when you look at it, it looks very bowed, like it looks like it's all bent around the edges, right? So it looks like it's stretched out. So that type of distortion is called barrel distortion, and that's somewhat common. But there's other characteristics in the camera which could be different. So one, for example, is where the sensor is located on the camera and where the center of the lens is. Most of us think that they're perfectly aligned, but they're not. Okay, so the lens could be a little bit higher or lower or a little bit over in the manufacturing process. And so what this software also does is it corrects the image, okay? It corrects for those characteristics of the camera to be more accurate when I bring it into the 3D program, okay? So it's called an idealized image. It's an ideal image, and that's what this does. So from here, I'm going to move into the 3D software, which is 3D Studio Max. So what I did was from here is I exported the camera position. So Photomodeler has a way of exporting the camera in the same coordinate system to the point cloud that I have. So let me show you that.
That point cloud is from the Faro?
That's from the Faro data. It's this data right here. So this is the house with the security camera. So I need to just turn some things on. So give me a moment here. I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to turn this and this, actually this. Okay, and I'm going to select this. Okay, so it might be a little hard to see. I'm going to see if I can zoom in, but these lines, I think you can see it on the screen there, but this is the camera that was exported out of Photomodeler. Now I've brought it into 3D Studio Max, and that's where it calculated the camera to be. So I didn't put it there. That's what the program calculated the camera to be, and you can see that it aligns very well with where the camera is. So that's a good sign. That's a positive. It means that, hey, things are aligning properly. Now, it's never perfect, never. Okay, so there's always going to be some. There has to be something. If it was perfect, then I'd be suspicious. So there has to be some error there, whatever. But this is where we go in and we start to check to see how things are aligned, and check to see how the points on the ground and surfaces align. And so that's what I'm going to show you next. Okay. So I'm gonna, excuse me, I'm gonna turn some things off and on. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look from the camera's position here, and let me see what I've got in the background. See, okay, nothing. So I'm gonna change the background. Let me use a composite image that I used for the nighttime image. I did a daytime image, the nighttime frames, and that sort of thing. But I'll show you this one because I think it makes the point as well. Okay, so what I have here is a composite image. Okay, and what I mean by that is, if you look at the original video, this one here, you see how the headlights pass through the driveway and the roadway, and there's like shadows, and you get interesting texture on the ground. So when a light hits a surface at a very oblique angle, okay, you pick up all the texture, you see all the roughness, and you see a lot of the features that are on there. So it's a technique that's used by investigators sometimes for footprints. So sometimes when you're taking a picture of a footprint, you can't see it really well because you're pointing down at the ground and the light might be in a certain way. So what you do is you put lighting that's very oblique, like kind of like the headlights sideways, and all of a sudden a lot of features pop out. So what I've done is I've made these lighter areas, I've composited them into one image so that when I go back to my software, you'll notice that it's much more, a lot of things are visible here. Okay, so these things here are the headlights. So that is, I would expect that because the headlights are going to cause a problem, okay? But it's just an artifact that's from the headlights. But down on the ground here, you'll see that everything from here down to this part here is pretty well lit up. So just to give you an example of the alignment between the camera and the point cloud. So if I turn the point cloud on, so if I pick a point over here, or if I pick a point, and if you keep your eye on the center of the driveway here, and then I turn on the point cloud, okay, you'll see that it's maybe a little hard to see in the point cloud, but the center is there. Maybe look at a point right here, and if I turn it off, you'll see that it falls in the same point. If you look at the fire hydrant and I turn it on, you'll see that the fire hydrant ends up in the same spot. This one here is interesting. Do you see this little thing on the ground here? I'm moving my mouse around. So let me show you what that ends up being. So I'm going to move out of the position here, but it is a, looks like it must be like a water valve or something, but it says water here, okay? So to give you an idea of how well it's aligned on the road, what I'm going to do is I am going to put a circle around here. Okay, so I've marked this circle, it's just around the cap, more or less, right? It looks fairly accurate, fairly tight around this, it's probably a cast iron cap, I don't know. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the view of the camera, and what I'm going to do is show you where that rests here. So it's right over here. So see this here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to shut it off and on, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'll make this easier so you can actually, I'll zoom in a bit. So that's where it is. So I'm going to shut this off. Let me click off of here so it's, okay. So I'm just going to shut it off and on. You see something kind of flashing there? I apologize, it's a little low. Let me get in a little bit closer. So it has a very good alignment with that bright spot there, and that's what the metal cap is, okay? So I've checked this with the daytime image, I've checked it with the nighttime image, I've checked it with the composite images, okay? And there's a pretty good alignment there. Now, there is something that I want to point out to you. If you look at the top part of the I guess it's the, I would call it the roof line, but the overhead porch or whatever, that part. When you turn the point cloud on, this is a little different. It lands in a slightly different position. And this area here, if you look at the video, there isn't anything I can click on, right? So there's no points there for me to say, I know exactly where that point is from the video and where it is in the point cloud. So that area remains what I would call somewhat uncorrected. Okay, so the stuff that's close up on the roof is not that well aligned, but the driveway and the roadway seems to be very well aligned from what I can see. Okay, from everything that I pointed out to you, like looking at the cap on the roadway, if you look at where the transition is between the asphalt and the curb, the concrete curb, the cut lines on the driveway, it all looks like it's falling very well into place. So, when that happens, that means that I have the camera aligned to the point cloud data. So now this is where I can now begin the reconstruction process. Okay? So this is where it's all come together, and so we can leave that behind us, and now we can move into the actual analysis. So for this part, what I'm going to do is get into the truck. So I was provided, let me just move this. I was provided a model, I'll move it over here for now. But I was provided a 3D laser scan of the truck, okay, like this. And so I'm able to bring the truck on the roadway, like I can put it back on the roadway in 3D, right? And my mouse is moving here, sorry. So what I can do is, I can look through the camera's eye, right? Look through the position of the camera, look to see where certain features are, like the headlights or the bumper or things like that, and I move the vehicle in that position, okay, from that perspective. So let me give you an idea here of what's going on.
If I can ask, you imported the scan data of the truck. Is that just another layer, as if it's like another photograph on top of the other data, and you're just creating layers?
It is a layer, that's correct, so I can shut it off and on, but it exists in the virtual world. So I have the 3D street, and I put the 3D model of the truck on top of it, and they're both to scale to one another. So the truck is the correct size relative to the roadway. So everything is to scale.
So there is nothing in that process that would warp the size of the truck, the size of the roadway, the size of the driveway, the size of the fire hydrant, to make it fit, so to speak?
No.
Okay. Why not?
It's just not how it works. I'd have to find a way to deliberately stretch it out or do something. And I mean, if I did, you'd probably see that it looks kind of weird. If I had a stretched vehicle or something like that, the tires wouldn't be round; they'd look like ellipses. So everything is in agreement there, and that's typically not how the software works. It doesn't. When you export, it doesn't scale anything. All it does is it maintains whatever units you're using. Yeah. So it doesn't. Let me say that again so it's clear. I can scale it. So for example, I can change the units. So I can change, for example, from feet, I can export it in inches. Okay, but just the units have changed, so that scale has changed. But I can't export it and make the front of the car bigger than the back or something like that. That you can't do. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back in the images of the night frames. Okay. And I'm going to move to the camera's view here. And I'm going to put the truck on here like this. So with respect to the truck, there were 106 frames. I didn't analyze all 106 because that would have been somewhat redundant, and some of them you can't actually analyze them because the vehicle's not in good view. So I took the first, like I said, if I go to the end, I'm on frame 79 here, and I chose some specific frames. So I have like 37, I have 50, I've got 58, I have 62, and then I have up here I have 76 through 79. Okay, so these are my keys, what we call key frames. Okay, so what you'll notice here is that I started from, actually I went backwards. So I started from the end, and then I worked backwards. Okay, so for the purposes of my report, okay, most of my analysis focuses on this frame 79 and then working backwards to frame 37. Okay, so this part here where you can kind of see the headlights. Prior to that, I just aligned the vehicle roughly to the headlights. Okay, so I wasn't really trying to make any specific kind of analysis. So if I go backwards from here, you'll see that as I move the vehicle, it kind of follows the headlights. Okay, like that. Okay, so I hope that that's clear. Okay, and then so now I can start, let's say, from the back here. And so this is just roughly positioned where I see the headlights. Now, if we want to see what that looks like in 3D, we can move out of the camera's position. So let me do that. So this is where the vehicle is here. Now, position. Now, I put it there. It could be more forward. It could be a little bit more left, more right, more back. So in fairness, that is not exactly where it was, okay? That's me going, it looks pretty good to the headlights. It looks like it's aligned to the headlights, and that's what it is. So we have to be fair here. I don't know that it's actually there in that position. I do know that it's somewhere in that area, but not specifically in that specific location. So.
If I can ask, were you given any information about this case prior to doing that would have caused you to intentionally put that truck there?
No.
And you said that it's based on the light being emitted from the headlights. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so the positioning of that truck, even though it may not be precise, is dictated by what?
By the headlight pattern that's seen in the video.
Okay. Please continue.
So from this point here, what I'm going to do, you can see some of the background here. So just ignore the background. I'm just going to move something like this. So if I scroll through this now, another important point that I need to make here is that I'm just looking at the individual frames. So I'm not looking at any speed or distance calculations or anything like that. So what I have is just a frame, a frame, a frame. So the time in between those frames and that sort of thing, I'm not considering. It's not important to the work that I'm doing, okay? So if you see me scrolling when I move across here, this does not represent the speed of the vehicle or anything like that. That's just me scrolling through back and forth. The vehicle doesn't move that fast, right? So please keep that in mind. Speed, distance, that time-distance relationship, that's not part of this analysis. All right, so but just to look at the relative path of what I found, it looks like it's doing something like this. Okay, so I'm going a little slow here, and then it kind of goes somewhere along here. So this is the last frame, 79, and because we're in 3D, we can kind of move around. So you can see that just something I noted, and I don't know why, but the vehicle is close to the curve, and I don't know why. But you can actually see it you can see it in the nighttime video. If you go, you'll see that you can kind of see the outline of the transition between the asphalt and the concrete curb, and it's just it's there because it's there. I don't know why it's there. But that's just something that I noted. It's kind of close. So from this point, I think what I'd like to do is start going through my report, if I may, and talk about the different things that I looked at.
Okay. So what did you look at?
All right. So there were a number of things that I looked at from the video, and I'll just run through them very briefly. One was the headlight pattern, the spacing, and the spacing between the headlights and the height off the ground. The front bumper, so there's like a glare off the front bumper, so we can check the height of that glare from the bumper down to the ground. I also looked at the back of the vehicle, so there's you can kind of make out the outline in those last few frames. I looked at the exhaust pipe, and I also looked at the shadow that's cast by this vehicle in the video at the back, and see how that compares to the Chevrolet truck that we have.
Before you get into that, were you given any type of direction of what items to look at and compare for possible alignment with the evidence video?
Initially, not very much. Somebody had mentioned an electrical box, and I didn't know what that was until I got pictures of the vehicle. But otherwise, there wasn't a lot of information to look at. Let me repeat that. I think somebody said something about. Somebody may have said something about the exhaust pipe. Somebody said something about the exhaust pipe.
But all the other characteristics are ones that you independently looked at based on your analysis of the evidence.
That's correct.
Okay.
So let's go in and then let's look at this, and I'll just follow my report for ease of use here. Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at is the headlight pattern, and there were a number of measurements that I had taken on the vehicle, and I'm talking about the 2000 Chevrolet. So the actual vehicle that was scanned. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking at what measurement that makes, and then what I can do is see how it compares to what is in the video. So for this, I'm going to go back to frame 50, okay, because I can see the two headlights here. And I am going to turn some things on. All right, and I'll zoom in so you can see. So I'm going to move this in. You see these circles that are around the headlights? So what those are,
What frame?
frame 50. What these are here, if I shut the truck off, it's an outline of the headlight pattern. Okay, so you can see that the bulk of this glare from the headlight, the strongest part anyway, is inside of this circle, or this ellipse. Okay? So what we can do is at this frame, you can see how that projects onto the vehicle. So I'm going to turn the truck back on for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it out of position. I'm going to move it closer to the camera. So it's going to look a little weird because the background image is still there, but I'm just going to move the vehicle. So when you look at this from a different perspective, okay, you have something like this. So what I found when you make the comparison, if I go through the data, is that the measurement on the Chevrolet truck in terms of the horizontal distance, so the inner and the outer distance of the actual truck is like 47 to about 68, 69 inches, somewhere in that range. When you look at the headlight pattern, when you look at these ellipses, you can see that the inner dimension between the two is going to get smaller, and the outer dimension is going to get bigger, right, on the horizontal width, right? So those were found approximately 40 inches on the inside, and then 70 inches on the outside. So again, about 47 to 68 or 69 on the truck, and I have about 40 to 70 on the ellipses. Okay, so and obviously it's bigger. You can see that it's larger. Similarly, there's the height, so the upper and lower parts of the glare. So the headlamp on the vehicle, or the let me just make sure that I'm clear on what I said. The headlamps in the vertical direction, they're about 27.4 to 38.5. So the low end is 27.4 and the high end is 38.5. And then from the video, we're getting about 27 to 40. Okay, so the range is obviously bigger because the glare casts a larger pattern. But even from looking at it, and aside from the numbers, you can see that the headlamps fall within the range of these ellipses. Okay, so the headlamps, in just looking at this, are consistent with the 2000 Chevrolet truck. Now, in fairness, any vehicle that has this spacing could potentially fall into this range, right? So if you had the same type of truck, the same model truck, or a truck that has that type of spacing, it would fall into that range. Okay, so please keep that in mind.
If I can ask about the nighttime video itself, was there enough detail given the quality of that image to individualize the measurements more?
Could you ask that again?
Okay.
In a different way?
I will try.
Okay.
Given the quality of the nighttime video, are things such as glare and washout and the perspective of the truck, does it make it difficult to be more precise in those measurements?
So yeah, obviously. So the quality and the resolution, and plus the fact that you have a low lighting condition with bright lights, that's all going to cause some effect, right? It's going to cause a problem. It's the same as being in a dark room and somebody's shining a bright flashlight at your eyes. You get blinded, right? You get washed out. You can't see what's around you, and that's sort of the effect of what's happening here. Low resolution camera. The security camera itself may not have the best ability to capture the dynamic range, the different ranges of brightness and darkness that we have, right? So if you have a really good camera, it has a wider, what we call dynamic range, so it'll pick up the darks and the lights much better, a wider range. And this security camera is, let's face it, it's a cheaper camera, right? The manufacturers just want to record a lot of images pretty quick, and they try to make a low-cost product. And then, of course, the glare is causing a problem. So yeah, those are the factors that help you. But so that's why I can't get down to a specific you know, I'm down to half an inch range. Like we're talking inches here, right? So just be aware of that. Okay, so we've done the headlamps. Now what I'd like to do is well, let me show you one more thing. So I've got let me move in here, excuse me. So I'm just gonna scroll this through. So I just did this for a few frames, but I've attached it to the vehicle. And if I slide it through, you see how the ellipses follow the vehicle? This is in the video, right? So there's good consistency there, even on some other frames. It's just a quick check that I did. And I really only aligned it close to 50. So 50 is like the main one, but I noticed that it aligns pretty well in the other frames.
Well, are you doing some computer magic telling it those ellipses must follow the headlights in the suspect video?
Well, what I've done is I've matched them in frame 50, and then what I've said is it's like I glued them onto the truck, and then I move them. So as the truck moves and changes position, those ellipses will follow. But the point is that they don't all of a sudden change into something else or whatever. They're fairly consistent with what I'm seeing, even in a few frames before or a few frames after. Yeah. So, okay, let's leave the headlights and let's move on to the glare pattern, which is what I'm calling the glare pattern. So for that, shut these off. I have these lines that are here, and if let me shut these off for a moment and let me zoom in. So you see these lines? It's a little bit clearer on my screen than yours, I think, but there's these horizontal lines like this, and this is an effect that you can get off the top of the bumper. So if you have a bumper and the headlights are shining, you can get this glare that's off of that. So what I did was something very simple. Is I said, okay, let me place a line that follows the glare in these two spots, and let me measure that position down to the ground. How high is that off the ground? Is that glare pattern off the ground, and what range does it fall into? So let me do this now. I'm going to move out of this for a second, and I'm going to, I'm going to move here. So this is the marked points here where the glare was. And then I created these lines that go down to the ground. So even if I get close, you'll see that they just touch the ground where the asphalt is, okay? And if I go under, I'm gonna go underneath the point cloud. It's one of the cool things you can do. So I'm gonna go under, you don't see that they go beyond that, right? They just touch off on the top surface. Okay, so this one, if I go back and I look at the glare on the truck, so on the Chevrolet truck, the actual measurement was found to be I'm sorry, 26 inches. So it was around 26 inches on the truck. Okay. When we checked the glare in this particular frame, it goes about 24 and a half to about 26 and a half. So it changes, and that could be because the vehicle. Actually, I looked at the vehicle, it doesn't even seem, it's an older truck, so it's not even perfectly straight, or if the bumper was hit or something, different things can happen, okay? And plus there's a range of error here. I can't get down to precise measurements. Again, we're down on the inch range, but I think as you can see, it falls in that range. Okay, once again, it falls in that range, so in my opinion, the measurements show that it's consistent, okay, with what we're seeing. The 2000 Chevrolet truck is consistent with what we see in the video.
As I asked with the headlights, is the glare subject to the same, I guess, slight inaccuracies caused by glare, washout, quality of the video, etc.?
Yeah, same issue there. Same issue. Okay, let's move on to the back of the vehicle, because I think that's there's some other things there that are we need to talk about.
Well, we interrupt you, we'll go and take our morning recess this time before we get to that section.